everyone, it's Allie, and this is my spoiler-free review for When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. So, When No One Is Watching is a thriller that follows two characters, one, Sydney, who is a black woman, and Theo, who is a white man. And Sydney lives in a neighborhood that is historically black and has been for a very long time, but she starts being concerned when she sees a bunch of her neighbors randomly move out that she had no idea would, and just kind of start leaving the neighborhood as a bunch of white people start coming in. So the whole thriller is basically surrounding this idea of gentrification, which is basically making a traditionally black neighborhood white in hopes of it being better that way or something like that. And the villains who are basically trying to make this occur are very nefarious in what they do, and it seems hidden to her at first as she starts uncovering a lot of the truth with her white neighbor who is named Theo. Theo is in a relationship with a very rich white woman, and he and her don't get along very well, and they're about to break up, and it's just not going very well, so he decides to spend some of his time with his neighbor Sydney to help her create like a historical tour of the neighborhood that she's kind of been assigned to do, or has rather volunteered to do, and that's kind of how they meet. So I like a lot of things in this book. One thing I really liked is I liked the transition, or not the transition, but I like the different genres it seemed to use, even though it is marketed mainly as a thriller. The beginning feels a lot like a romantic comedy or like a contemporary between Sydney and Theo and just them getting to know each other, and that part is like very sweet, and it really does resemble more of a drama or a rom-com or something along those lines. And then later on you get to the thriller aspect, and I really liked that blending of genres within one book and enjoyed how that was executed. I also really thought that the interracial dialogue between Sydney and Theo seemed pretty authentic. Those particular characters had a lot of great character development and had a lot of good backstories, had a lot of good conversations. Their relationship as friends progresses in a way that seems very natural and authentic and fun, and I really did enjoy that aspect of it and them getting to know each other in the beginning of the book before we get into the really thriller nitty-gritty part of it. I also thought that it was successful in being very ominous. It is very creepy to not know where your neighbors are going and just to see like these subtle changes in your neighborhood and being afraid of what that could mean, and then just some other events that lead up to that and how I could feel it is ominous for the characters. That was really well done, and I think it did a great job with a lot of those aspects of the book. However, there are a couple things that I really didn't like in this book, which makes it really hard for me to ultimately give a rating to, but I'll talk about that in a minute. One is that while the main characters, Theo and Sydney, have great character development, the side characters, and especially the villains, really do not. I think that the villains kind of are created via stereotypes rather than really creating solid, rounded out characters for them. And even though they are the bad guys, I still feel like bad guys can be well-rounded out people. For example, Theo's girlfriend is one of the bad guys in this book. You can kind of see like their relationship not going very well, and she just is kind of like a jerk. But the way that the author creates her character is basically saying that she doesn't eat meat and does DIY projects, and that's her personality. So I kind of feel like here we're taking on stereotypes in order to create a character rather than really rounding out the character with a bunch of backstory and motivations that are a little bit more below the surface. And I think that the characters very well might have had those, but as the reader, you don't really get to see those, and I would have preferred to see them a little bit more rounded out. With that in mind, the other half of that, which is basically the same critique, but it's the one thing that made this book from being a perfect thriller for me, was that the bad guys were a little bit too obvious in what they were doing. Like they are presented as being very nefarious and like hard to find out and like subtle, but in reality in the book they don't seem very subtle at all, but rather they seem to be going at it with a hammer, but we're being told that it's subtle. So I would have preferred it to be even a little bit more nefarious and subtle in how they were going about it, to where you questioned yourself even more than you did. So I think that in the end the bad guys seemed a little bit too cartoonish and a little bit one-dimensional, and this book would have been a lot better if they were a little bit more nefarious and full of motivation and backstory. That being said, the overall idea of this book was amazing, and her way of thinking it through and her ideas and the rom-com side of it, all very good. So I ended up giving this book a 3 or 3.5 out of 5 stars. I can't quite sit solid on that yet, but I think it's worth the read. It's worth definitely giving this a chance, since it is a POC author who is giving a perspective that is uniquely from a Black American and something that has been historically important to give a look to. So I would recommend it, but there were some elements that I think fell short. So for that, it's a 3.5 out of 5 stars or 3 out of 5 stars. Still can't decide, but definitely worth the read. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like. Consider subscribing to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you later.